Epictetus was a slave, not a metaphor for one, an actual slave, owned by a man named Epictetus in Rome during the 1st century. Epictetus, by several accounts, was not a gentle owner. There is a story, whether literal or not, that he once twisted Epictetus's leg to the point of breaking it. Epictetus is said to have simply told him, "That will break." And when it did, he said, "I told you so." That is the person whose thinking we are going to sit with today. Because when it comes to injustice, Epictetus is not speaking from theory. He lived inside it. He did not have the option of reframing his circumstances from a comfortable distance. And yet what he left behind is one of the most precise accounts of what it means to not be destroyed by what is done to you. The wound of injustice is something most people carry in some form. The version you experienced may look nothing like slavery. It may be something much smaller in scale and still completely real in its effect. A decision made above you that cost you something you deserved. A reputation damaged by someone else's dishonesty. A door closed by people who had the power to close it and no obligation to be fair about it. The specific form matters, but Epictetus's question cuts across all of them. He made a clear distinction between two categories of things: things within your control and things outside of it. He called this the dichotomy of control, and he was not casual about it. He was strict, almost uncomfortably strict. What is within your control? Your judgments, your intentions, your response to what happens, the direction you choose to point your will. What is outside of your control? Everything else. Other people's choices, outcomes, how you are treated, what others decide you deserve. On paper, this looks like an argument for passivity. Accept whatever happens and call it peace. But that is a misreading, and it was not what Epictetus meant. He was a former slave talking to students who had agency and resources he never had. And even from that position, he was not telling them to roll over. He was telling them something more precise, that the cost of anchoring your well-being to things outside your control is that you will always be at the mercy of those things. Not sometimes, always. Every time someone behaves badly, you pay the price. The wound of injustice, in Stoic terms, has two layers. The first is the event itself, the actual unfair treatment, the real consequence, the genuine harm. That layer is real, and it deserves to be named. The second layer is what you do with the event afterward, the story you build around it, the way it shapes how you engage with everything that comes next. Whether it becomes a filter through which all future experience gets processed. That second layer is where you have power, not because the first one did not matter, but because the first one is finished, and the second one is still happening right now, inside you. Epictetus used a word that gets translated as impression, the immediate mental image that arises when something happens to you, the interpretation that arrives before you have consciously chosen it. He argued that the most important practice a person can develop is learning to pause between the impression and the response, to not simply be carried by the first thing the mind produces. This is not suppression. It is not telling yourself the injustice was fine, or that the anger is unjustified. The anger is not unjustified. What Epictetus was pointing at is whether you let the impression run unchecked, or whether you can create one moment of examination before it determines your next move. Because an unchecked impression of injustice tends to produce a very specific pattern. You begin to see injustice everywhere, not because you are wrong, but because the mind that has been organized around that injury becomes skilled at finding evidence for it. It starts to color neutral situations. It attaches meaning to things that may not carry it. And slowly, the injury that someone else caused becomes something you perpetuate on yourself. There is a letter, or at least a fragment attributed to Epictetus, that makes a point worth sitting with. He wrote that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. This is often quoted as a comfort, and it is. But it is also a challenge. Because imagination is not outside your control. It is precisely inside it. What you rehearse, you reinforce. The mind that keeps replaying the unfair treatment, that keeps narrating the injustice, that keeps building the case, is not processing the wound. It is maintaining it. It is choosing to stay in contact with the pain because somewhere it has become more familiar than the alternative. This is not weakness, it is a habit. And habits, in Stoic practice, are exactly the territory where work is possible. Epictetus was not asking for detachment. He had students who loved people, who had careers, who wanted things and fought for things. He was asking for something more specific, that the foundation of your stability not be located in outcomes you cannot control. If your sense of your own worth depends on being treated fairly, you have handed something essential about yourself to people who may never deliver it. That is not justice. That is a second wound, self-inflicted. The Stoic position on injustice is not that it does not matter. It is that mattering and controlling you are two different things. Something can have been genuinely wrong, genuinely harmful, genuinely worth standing against, and still not be allowed to be the architecture of your inner life. Epictetus kept his equanimity not by feeling nothing. He kept it by being very clear about what he was responsible for. His character, his responses, the quality of attention he brought to each situation. That is what was not for sale, not even to someone who owned him. The wound you carry may be real. The question is whether you are going to let it set the terms for everything that comes after. You have more say in that than you might currently believe. Not because the injustice was small, because your response to it is genuinely yours. And unlike what was done to you, that part has not already been decided.